cold. And if you put heavy oil on there, the mechanism might not work. All right? So you must oil it with light oil. Now, if you're talking in the summer, go ahead and put that heavy oil on there. All right? Some of the things, before I get into going into Mount and what's facing us, I'm going to go into a little history. I always like to do that because I'm also a history buff. Just so you know, I have a degree in nuclear physics. You know, so, and I'm a very young man, and I've traveled around. I've learned a lot of stuff. I study the Bible and other books they took out of the Bible, so I'm very well versed in that. I study the ancient Hebrew as well as the modern Hebrew and Arabic. So life is no joke to me. This is no joke, and I feel more well-rounded in terms of when I can read something and I understand clearly with respect it relates. See, I don't know if you know this, but a friend of mine last Saturday, he wanted to start a business in Harlem. So he sent away for some information. And they sent him this big binder back. And in the binder, it points out that 60% of our people are functional illiterates. 60%. So you know that during the old days, our folks was only able to perhaps mark an X on the line. You know, today they can actually sign their name. But that's the extent of it. If you were to sit down with them and break out the daily news and say, I want you to read this paragraph for me and give me to the bottom line, they can't do it. They don't have the ability to do that. But somehow we try to play it off, and we try to play it off in such a way whereas amongst ourselves, we pretend that we know what's going on, and we pretend that we can understand and break down and analyze information. And those of us that know, when we encounter people who pretend that they know, we know right away that they don't know, no matter how hard they try. And a perfect example, without dealing with anything serious, is when you get into the area of religion. And the Bible, it says so itself, and I think it's the book of Proverbs, that a simple mind will believe every word, but a prudent man will look into the word. He seeks the wisdom. Not just quoting some word, you have to find out how does this thing relate. Things are twofold, threefold, and so on, multidimensional. Well, let me get into a little history about what's coming up first, Yugoslavia. I don't know if any of you all know this, but the black people ruled Yugoslavia. All right, and I had a book that I brought out, was it last Saturday? Last Saturday, The Icons. In that book, it shows you all of the kings of Serbia. The original Serbians were all black. So were the Croatians. So were the Macedonians. All of that is in the land of Yugoslavia. I have books home with full-color portraits of it in there, on doctrine. It's called The Icons. And you can get a book, you can get that book at the Metropolitan Museum of Art or Strand Bookstore. I like to go to Metropolitan Museum of Art because they usually have books like that handy all the time. So, in order to get down and find out where we fit in things, we must know about our prior history. Because without us not knowing the prior history, we run the risk of making the same mistakes again. The only history that most of our folks know about is, okay, black folks was taken out of Africa and brought over here as slaves. Wrong answer. We were also taken out of Europe and brought over here as slaves. Most folks don't know that. That's a historical fact. What happened to all the black people that ruled in Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Russia? Where are they? They came over here as slaves also. And yes, we invented German. I gotta tell you that. Some folks would tell you Anglo-Saxons apply to white people. No, it don't. Anglo-Saxon translated means angels, sons of Isaac. It's got nothing to do with white people. That's what that word translates into. A lot of us today still use the terminology African American. You can't be that. Which part of you is Roman and which part of you is Italian? You're not part of that family. In America, translated means work, trouble, and misery. So how can you call yourself that? There's a root word to that word America. See, now the brothers and myself and the other groups that I study with, this is the type of study that we do. We go and crack open them books printed in 1880, 1805, 1760s. These are the books that we read. That was the real history. We don't read that stuff they tell us about today and some of the stuff that our own people is writing, because most of that's off. Most of that history, that's not even history, that's garbage. And we'll tell anybody who writes books like that, it's garbage. But I'm a so-called American Indian. Now, you didn't know that until I told you that. Most of my foreparents over here look like how I look and look like how you look. You know, my father's a full-blood Cherokee. And my mom's a full-blood Blackfoot. And we know our history, and we know your history. You came off the slave ships. We know who you are. We were already traveling back and forth, communicating with each other. We helped to build cities together over here in this land. But you wouldn't know that. The only thing they tell you in history is teepees, totem poles, and we worship the sun. Hugwash. We had nothing of the sort over here. We were some of the most civilized and intelligent people working with our brothers who was coming from the continent of Africa as well as Europe. So there's nothing that so-called basically black historians can tell me, who's a native of this land, about my own history. I can sit him down and tell him some things. And 9 times out of 10, when I get the opportunity to do so, I do so. You know, our biggest thing is let's clear up all of this nonsense here. So, going back to Yugoslavia, if the original inhabitants of that land were black, and we look over there today, and you see that they're not, then obviously don't get involved with that. And since we're in the church, I know perhaps those of you who attend the church might be familiar with Haggai 2:22. He shall make every brother come down, every man come down by the sword of his brother. He shall pull down every kingdom. Why is this being done? It's being done for our sake. Also, another prophecy is that he's going to remove this military machine off our backs, because that's what's going to be confronted us here as it relates to urban warfare. So he's going to give them, the creator, however you refer to him as, is going to give them a strong reason not to be here. And you notice the presidents have basically been saying, listen, we are not going to get involved in any quagmires. Well, guess what? Regardless of what you say, you're going. And those of us, unfortunately, who don't know what's going on, meaning that we can't read the sign of the times, those people are going down. And these are our people. They're going down. Another prophecy, Book of Zechariah. 2 parts of our people shall be cut off and die. So get prepared for it. It's coming. There's nothing you can do to get out of that one. In terms of trying to wake everybody up, because everybody is not going to wake up. You got folks who will argue with us tooth and nail, and yet the brothers and myself will show up with our facts. I've got operation orders home on Rex 84. I didn't realize at the time what it was. And this is when I was in the military. In 1983 and 1984, I was in the military as a lieutenant, doing my part. And what's my part? Refurbishing prison barracks at Fort Drum as an engineer. But it wasn't explained to me that that was a piece of the pie, which eventually our people are going to find themselves housed in. That was not explained to me. I had to figure it out later on. Once I got a win and started listening to some other folks who knew what they were talking about. Okay. So I'm not going to go too much into what I've already said in terms of overdoing it about the Serbs and the Bosnians. They're not indigenous to that part of the land over there. They killed off the original inhabitants of that land, and now they live there, and they're calling themselves us, like they always do. No matter where they go, they call themselves by our names. You can't tell a white man who's born in Africa that he's not an African. He ain't going for it. Everywhere he goes, he wants to call himself us. And meanwhile, they don't want to see us stay around on the scene. All right. Now, before they can get those of our people, and I'm only talking about our people that's involved in the military machine, involved to the scale in which they wish us to be all involved in as it relates to the next war. They can't do that until they get the black women trained in the combat arms. And they're working on that right now. So you're going to have black women who's going to now be infantry, Marines, Army